welcome to today's deep dive. We've got excerpts from Peter Thiel's 0 to 1.
Oh, yeah, this one's a classic.
It's like the playbook for building the future, right?
Absolutely. Thiel's ideas always get you thinking.
So are you ready to decode what makes these groundbreaking companies tick?
Let's do it. What insights can we pull from these excerpts for you?
Okay, so Thiel, he doesn't waste any time, shaking things up.
Right off the bat.
He challenges this whole idea that globalization equals progress.
Yeah.
Like the ultimate form of progress.
Interesting.
Instead, he's saying true innovation is about creating something totally new.
Okay.
Going from 0 to 1.
From 0 to 1.
And he argues that we've been stuck kind of in this rut of globalization since like the 1970s.
Yeah, he uses the dot-com bubble as a good example of this. Like initially it was all about, radical technological advancement, and then it's sort of morphed into this frenzy of just copying existing ideas.
Right.
But he says, the dot-com crash, it wasn't all bad.
Okay.
It taught Silicon Valley, he says, some really crucial lessons.
Like what?
Like, he says, even having a flawed plan is better than being paralyzed by indecision.
Oh, interesting.
Which I think we can all relate to. And he also argues that a competitive market, it can actually stifle innovation.
How so?
Because everyone's so busy fighting for these tiny little scraps.
Yeah.
They can't focus on building something truly new and groundbreaking.
Oh, it's like that saying, if you chase 2 rabbits, you'll catch neither.
Right. Exactly.
Exactly. So instead of fearing monopolies, Thiel almost seems to be arguing for them.
Yeah, it's a very different way of looking at it.
He calls them like creative monopolies.
Yeah, these are companies.
Companies like Google.
Like Google, Apple, yeah.
That have dominated. But also brought us some groundbreaking innovation.
Yeah. Yeah, he believes that in a dynamic world, these kinds of monopolies can actually drive progress.
Okay.
By creating entirely new categories of abundance.
So it's like they're almost forced to innovate because they've already kind of won the existing game.
In a way, yeah. And they have the resources to really think big.
That makes sense.
So take Google, for example.
Yeah.
They essentially own the search market, right?
Right.
But that dominance, he argues, has allowed them to invest in things like self-driving cars and artificial intelligence, things that are way beyond just search.
It's like they're playing a whole different game at that point.
Exactly.
So instead of seeing perfect competition as this like the holy grail of business,
right.
Thiel's suggesting it's more like a recipe for stagnation.
A race to the bottom, almost.
Yeah, everyone's so busy copying each other.
Exactly.
No one has the breathing room to create something truly groundbreaking.
Right. And he uses the example of all those mobile credit card readers that popped up after Square.
Oh, yeah.
Just a sea of almost identical products.
Just a sea of little white squares. So he argues that this obsession with competition, it can lead to what he calls a business graveyard.
It's a powerful image.
It is.
And he's saying it's not just in tech, right? This cutthroat competition, it's ingrained in everything.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, like our education system, for one.
Okay.
Which often prioritizes being well-rounded over specialization.
Interesting.
Or our financial markets, which often reward short-term gains over long-term vision.
Right. Because if everything is driven by that short-term thinking, it's obviously harder to make those big bets that lead to those like real innovations.
Precisely. And that leads perfectly into his views on luck versus planning.
Right, because it seems like he's saying you can't just stumble into those big breakthroughs.
Exactly. Thiel believes we've kind of fallen into this trap of what he calls indefinite optimism.
Indefinite optimism. I like that.
It's this idea that, the future will be better, but we don't necessarily need a concrete plan to get there.
We'll just figure it out.
It'll just kind of work itself out.
Yeah.
And he contrasts this with what he calls the definite optimism of previous eras.
Okay.
He points to ambitious projects like, the Empire State Building, the Apollo program.
Yeah.
These were bold undertakings.
Huge.
Driven by a clear vision and a belief in the power of planning.
So it's not just about hoping for a better future, right? It's about actually shaping that future through like deliberate action and long-term thinking.
Exactly. And that's where his really intriguing concept of secrets comes into play.
Ooh, secrets. I like where this is going.
Right. Thiel argues that truly valuable businesses are built around secrets, unique insights or innovations that give them a significant advantage.
So it's like, what are those secrets that are like hiding in plain sight right now that
Exactly.
no one's paying attention to.
The problems that seem impossible to solve today,
Yeah.
but might hold the key to, like, unlocking incredible value in the future.
It's like that saying, the best place to hide something is in plain sight.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Because no one's looking there.
It's about having the courage to explore those uncharted territories, to challenge that conventional wisdom,
Right.
and to ask those what-if questions that others might dismiss.
But you can't do it alone, though, right?
You need a good team.
You need your people.
Absolutely. Which is why he talks about how important it is to surround yourself with the right people.
Yeah, he even compares choosing a co-founder to, like, getting married.
Which, knowing the intensity and pressure of the startup world,
Right.
might not be too far off.
It's a big decision.
It's a huge decision.
It's a big commitment.
He's highlighting that it's about way more than just finding someone with complementary skills.
Right.
You need someone who shares your values, who you trust, like implicitly, who understands your vision so deeply that they can help you weather those inevitable storms.
Right, because there will be storms.
Oh, there will be storms.
You need someone to weather them with.
Absolutely. And it doesn't stop there, he says. It's not just about the founding team, right?
So who else?
He believes that ethos, that deep trust, that shared vision, it needs to extend to the entire company.
To the entire company.
Wow. You've got to create a culture where everyone feels like an owner,
That's huge.
not just an employee.
So how do you do that? How do you make people feel like owners if they don't actually own the company?
Well, that's where his concept of what he calls extending the founding comes in.
Huh.
It's not just about hiring smart people.
Right.
They have to be as passionate, as dedicated to the mission as the founders themselves.
So how do you do that?
He believes that giving employees equity, actual ownership in the company, is one of the most powerful ways to foster that deep commitment.
Okay, so they have skin in the game.
They're not just working for a paycheck, they're building something meaningful.
They're building something bigger than themselves.
Exactly, something bigger than themselves. And, he makes this really interesting and, let's be honest, a little out there comparison
Okay.
between the most successful startups
Busy with it.
and, of all things, cults.
Cults. Okay, now you have to tell me more.
Right. It's this provocative analogy.
It is.
To be clear, he's not condoning any of the, the harmful or negative aspects associated with cults.
Right, of course.
But he's highlighting how the best startups, they share some similarities with these groups.
Okay, like what?
Like this intense sense of belonging, a shared belief in a mission that goes beyond just making money.
Okay.
It's about tapping into something deeper.
It's like a movement.
Almost like a movement.
Yeah.
And it resonates on an almost emotional level.
It's about building that tribe.
Yes.
That tribe of believers.
That tribe of belief.
Who are all in, who are willing to go that extra mile because they really believe in what they're building. But how do you create that? Is that something you can just manufacture?
That's the million-dollar question.
All right.
Does it have to occur organically?
Yeah.
Thiel doesn't necessarily offer like a simple formula,
Okay.
but he hints at some key ingredients.
Okay, like what?
One of them is definitely leadership.
Okay.
He talks about how successful founders, they often embody what he calls the founder's paradox.
Oh, I love a good paradox.
Who doesn't?
Tell me more.
It's this idea that the very best founders, they possess these seemingly contradictory traits.
Okay.
They're incredibly confident,
Yeah.
yet also deeply paranoid.
Paranoid.
Always anticipating potential threats.
Okay.
They're insiders, deeply knowledgeable in their fields,
Yeah.
but also outsiders willing to challenge the status quo to see things from a fresh perspective.
So they don't fit into a box.
They don't fit into a box.
They're both. They're everything at once.
They straddle these two worlds.
So it sounds like it takes a very, very specific kind of person to be a truly successful founder.
It makes you wonder, how many brilliant ideas are out there that never see the light of day because the founders didn't possess that unique combination?
It's almost like a recipe, but some ingredients are just way more elusive than others.
Absolutely. And, even with the perfect recipe,
Yeah.
the timing has to be right.
Oh, of course.
Which Thiel emphasizes throughout the book.
Yeah.
He argues that so many companies fail, not because their ideas are inherently bad,
Yeah.
but because they're either too early or too late to market.
Oh, that's so tough.
They miss that sweet spot, where the technology, the market demand, the overall context, they all align to create those perfect conditions for success.
It's like catching a wave.
Exactly.
You need the right board, the right skills.
Right.
But you also have to paddle like crazy at just the right moment to actually catch that wave and ride it all the way to shore.
You got it. And speaking of riding waves, let's dive into another area where Thiel challenges that conventional thinking. The often overlooked, or at least often underestimated, aspect of distribution.
Okay, so this is where so many companies, even those with amazing products, stumble, right?
So often.
They pour their heart and soul into building this great thing,
Yeah.
but then they kind of neglect that crucial step of actually getting it into the hands of customers.
It's a classic mistake.
Yeah.
And Thiel attributes it, at least in part, to this build it and they will come mentality.
Okay.
The classic, especially in places like Silicon Valley.
Right, right.
This kind of seductive notion that if you create a truly great product,
Yeah.
the customers will just magically find their way to your door.
Right, like the world is just waiting with bated breath for the next great like widget or whatever.
Exactly.
But Thiel, he's a pragmatist.
He is.
He's bringing us back down to earth.
Back down to reality.
So what does he say?
He argues that in most cases, a great product, it's just the starting point. You need a strategic approach to distribution to actually reach your target market and achieve real scale.
So what does that even look like?
Well, he emphasizes this principle he calls the power law of distribution.
Power law of distribution.
Okay.
Have you heard of this one?
I think so, but remind me.
It's the idea that for any given business, there are only a small number of distribution channels that will be exponentially more effective than all the others combined.
Oh, okay. So you're saying it's about finding those superhighways to your customer.
Exactly.
Instead of trying to take all these back roads.
Exactly. Don't spread yourself too thin.
Yeah.
Identify those key avenues, those channels, and focus your efforts there.
That makes a lot of sense.
And he even makes a pretty bold statement. He says that if you haven't figured out how to sell your product, you don't actually have a business yet,
Wow.
no matter how great the product itself might be.
He's not pulling any punches.
No, he's not. He's really highlighting that distribution isn't just this afterthought.
It's an integral part of the strategy from the very beginning.
Right, because even the best product in the world is useless if no one knows about it.
Exactly. And speaking of things that might require a bit of finesse,
Okay, let's hear it.
Thiel also challenges us to really rethink our perception of sales.
Sales. Yeah, that's a word that makes a lot of people,
Squirm a little bit.
yeah, squirm a little bit.
Yeah. He recognizes that it's often seen as this necessary evil,
Yeah.
something that's pushy or manipulative or,
Yeah, sleepy.
yeah.
Used car salesman vibes.
But he reframes it.
Okay.
He argues that we're all selling something, whether we realize it or not.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
We're selling our ideas, our skills, our vision for the future.
So it's about persuasion.
Exactly.
It's about communicating the value of what you have to offer in a way that resonates with your audience.
And that requires, empathy, understanding.
Yeah, for sure.
The ability to craft a compelling narrative.
It's storytelling.
It is storytelling.
And I feel like that's becoming even more important, that ability to tell a good story.
Absolutely.
In a world that's so saturated with information, with choices,
People are overwhelmed.
people are overwhelmed. They're looking for something to believe in.
Or they're looking for meaning, for connection, for something more than just, a product or a service.
Which kind of brings us to another area where Thiel, he encourages us to look beyond the surface. This whole, complex and ever-evolving relationship between humans and computers.
This is a big one.
Right, because it's something that causes a lot of anxiety these days, right?
Understandably so.
Right.
We're constantly bombarded with headlines about robots taking our jobs,
Yeah.
about artificial intelligence surpassing human intelligence.
Right, it's like the machines are coming to take over.
Exactly. So it's easy to get caught up in all these dystopian narratives.
Yeah. But Thiel, being Thiel, he offers a slightly different perspective, right?
Always the contrarian.
So what does he say?
He argues that instead of viewing computers as a threat, we should see them as complements to our own human capabilities.
Okay.
He's emphasizing that humans and computers, they excel at fundamentally different things.
All right. We've talked about those differences, but it's worth repeating. Humans are good at things like creativity, critical thinking, empathy, that whole complex problem solving, adapting to new situations on the fly.
Exactly.
And computers are great at processing huge amounts of data,
Yeah.
doing those repetitive tasks with precision.
Following instructions.
Right. They're very good rule followers.
Exactly.
Which is honestly sometimes more than I can say for some humans.
Right.
But anyway, so Thiel is saying it's about finding that synergy.
Yes.
Where humans and computers are working together.
Working together.
To achieve outcomes that neither could have accomplished on their own.
He believes that the real potential of technology lies not in replacing humans, but in augmenting our capabilities.
Making us smarter, more efficient, more effective. I mean, who doesn't want that?
Right. Who doesn't want a little boost?
It's about working with the machines, not against them.
Exactly.
Which I think is very reassuring because, for one, I welcome our robot overlords.
There you go.
I'm just kidding.
You had me worried for a second.
But, in all seriousness, this idea that technology can actually empower us rather than replace us, it's a much more hopeful and, frankly, more realistic vision of the future.
And it's a vision that should guide us as we continue to develop and integrate all these new technologies into our lives, into our work.
It's about being intentional.
Intentional.
Right. About how we develop and use technology, making sure that that progress actually aligns with human values.
Absolutely.
With human aspirations.
And remembering that ultimately technology is a tool.
Right. It's up to us to decide how we use it.
We shape our tools, and thereafter our tools shape us.
That's a great quote.
Right.
I love that.
Yeah. So, how are we shaping our tools? How do we want to shape the future? Those are the questions.
It's funny how Thiel connects that idea of being 10x better back to, his whole thing about definite optimism.
Right? Yeah, totally.
It's like settling for these incremental improvements is a symptom of that indefinite thinking.
We're just tinkering around the edges.
Exactly.
Instead of, actually swinging for the fences.
Instead of going for those world-changing innovations.
Right. Exactly.
Like those that defined those previous eras he talked about.
Totally. But he also reminds us that, those big swings,
Yeah.
they often come with a good deal of uncertainty.
Oh, yeah, tons of it.
Which is where I think his whole concept of, secrets comes in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's arguing that those truly groundbreaking companies, they're built around secrets.
Okay, so unpack that for me a little bit. What does he mean by secrets?
He's not just talking about, trade secrets or some proprietary technology that you're keeping under lock and key.
He's talking about this fundamental belief in the possibility of actually discovering something new, something that everyone else has either just completely overlooked or dismissed as impossible.
Interesting.
Think of it like, searching for gold. Everyone else is panning in the river, right?
Right.
But you've got this hunch that there's this, this much richer source.
Getting somewhere.
If you're just willing to, venture out into the unknown.
I like that. So it's about having the courage to explore, to kind of to go against the grain.
Absolutely, to challenge that conventional wisdom.
To pursue those paths that other people have written off.
To boldly go where no one has gone before.
Exactly. But, even with those expeditions, you need the right team by your side.
You can't do it alone.
You can't do it alone. And Thiel, he has some pretty strong opinions on how to build that team.
Oh, yeah. Team building, it's crucial. And he places a huge amount of importance on who you choose to build with.
He even goes so far as to compare the co-founder relationship to a marriage.
Which, knowing the pressure and the intensity of the startup world, might not be too far off.
Right.
It's a serious commitment.
It's a huge decision.
He's emphasizing that it's about way more than just finding someone who has complementary skills, to round out your weak spots.
Yeah, you have to have that deeper connection.
We need someone who shares your values, who you trust, truly implicitly trust.
Because things are going to get rough.
Things will get rough.
You're going to go through some stuff.
You're going to want to quit sometimes.
Right, exactly.
And then, it doesn't stop there. It's not just about you two, right? Mm-hmm. He believes that same ethos, that same trust, that shared vision, it needs to extend to the entire company.
The entire company.
You have to build a culture where every single person who works there feels like an owner.
That's huge.
Not just an employee.
Okay, so how do you do that?
How do you make someone feel like an owner if they don't actually have, equity in the company?
Right.
Well, that's where he introduces this concept of what he calls extending the founding.
Extending the founding. I like it.
It's not enough to just hire, a bunch of really, really smart people.
Okay.
They have to be just as passionate, just as dedicated to that mission, to that vision,
Right.
as the founders
I
themselves.
feel like that's so rare, though.
It's really hard to find. But he believes that, there are ways to cultivate it.
Like what?
One is, of course, giving those employees actual equity in the company.
Okay, so they're invested.
They have skin in the game.
They're not just working for a paycheck.
Exactly.
They're building something bigger than themselves.
Something that they truly believe in.
It's their baby, too.
Exactly. And to illustrate this idea even further, he makes this really interesting and honestly kind of out there comparison.
Hit me. What's the comparison?
He compares the most successful startups to, of all things, cults.
Cults. Okay, I did not see that coming.
Yeah, right.
So explain, what do startups and cults have in common in Thiel's mind?
Now, to be clear, he is not in any way condoning any of those, those harmful aspects that we normally associate with cults.
Of course not, yeah.
He's simply highlighting that the very best startups, they often share some surprising similarities with those kinds of groups.
Okay, like what?
Like, they have this intense sense of belonging, a shared belief in this mission, in this vision that goes way beyond just making a quick buck.
Okay, so it's about something deeper.
It's about tapping into something much, much deeper.
Something more meaningful.
Something more meaningful.
It's like a movement.
Exactly. It's like you're part of something that's bigger than yourself.
That's powerful, but how do you create that?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Is it something that you can just manufacture?
Right. Can you just force people to be that passionate about something?
Or does it have to occur organically? Thiel doesn't give us a clear-cut answer or, a step-by-step guide,
Right.
but he does hint at some key ingredients.
Like what? Give me the secret sauce.
Well, one is definitely leadership.
Of course, yeah.
He talks about how successful founders, very often, they embody what he calls the founder's paradox.
Ooh, the founder's paradox. I love a good paradox. Tell me more.
It's this idea that the very best founders, the most successful ones,
Yeah.
they seem to possess all of these seemingly contradictory traits.
Okay, so give me an example. What kind of contradictory traits?
Well, for example, they are incredibly confident.
Okay.
But at the same time, they're also deeply, deeply paranoid. Paranoid. They are always, always anticipating those potential threats, those things that could completely derail everything.
Wow, that's a tough balance to strike.
It is, right.
To be that confident, but also that aware of all the things that could go wrong.
To be able to see both sides.
Yeah, it's like they're living in two worlds at once.
Exactly. They're both insiders and outsiders at the same time.
Oh, interesting.
They're experts in their given field, but they're also willing to, completely challenge the status quo, to see things with fresh eyes.
So they're not afraid to be a little bit different, a little bit unconventional.
Not at all. In fact, they embrace it. They have to.
So it takes a very specific kind of person to be that successful, to be that kind of founder.
It makes you wonder how many brilliant ideas never even get off the ground,
Right, because they don't have that person at the helm.
Exactly.
Wow. It's almost like it's a recipe. But some of those ingredients, they're just way more elusive than others.
Absolutely. And, even with the perfect recipe, even with the perfect founder or founding team,
Yeah.
the timing still has to be right.
Oh, of course.
Which is something that Thiel, he hammers home throughout the entire book.
Right.
He argues that so many companies, they fail not because their ideas were bad,
Right.
not because the people weren't smart enough or passionate enough.
It's about being in the right place at the right time.
Exactly. It's about hitting that sweet spot where the technology is ready, where the market demand is there, where the context, all of it, it just aligns to create this perfect storm of opportunity.
It's like catching a wave.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
You need the right board, the right skills, but if you're not in the right spot at the right time,
if you don't paddle hard enough at just the right moment,
you're going to miss it.
You're going to wipe out.
And speaking of riding those waves and not wiping out,
I see where you're going with this.
let's dive into another area where Thiel, he's really challenging that conventional thinking.
Okay, hit me.
And it's this idea of distribution.
Distribution, yeah.
Right.
This is the one that trips so many people up.
Because they don't see it coming.
Right.
They don't think about it until it's too late. They pour all this time and this energy into building this incredible thing.
They think the hard part is over.
Right. But they forget about that last mile.
Getting it into the hands of customers, yeah.
Exactly. And Thiel, he attributes this kind of oversight to this pervasive build it and they will come
Yeah.
mentality.
It's so seductive.
Oh, it is, right?
Especially in places like Silicon Valley.
Right, where it's all about the idea, the innovation.
It's this belief that, if you create a truly great product, customers will they'll sniff it out. They'll beat a path to your door.
Yeah, because it's just that good.
Right. Exactly.
But Thiel, again, he's the pragmatist in the room.
Always bringing us back down to earth.
So what does he say?
He argues that a great product, in most cases, it's just the starting point.
Right. It's necessary, but not sufficient.
Exactly. You need a really smart, a strategic approach to distribution. You have to meet those customers where they are.
So how do you do that? How do you actually crack the code of distribution?
Well, he introduces this principle that he calls the power law of distribution.
Power law of distribution. Okay. I've heard that thrown around, but remind me what it is.
So the basic idea is that for any given business, there are only going to be a small handful of distribution channels that are actually going to move the needle.
Okay.
These are like the superhighways to your customers.
Okay.
And your job is to find them.
So it's not about being everywhere. It's about being in the right places.
Exactly. Because those few key avenues, those channels, they will be exponentially more effective than all the others combined.
Interesting.
It's about focus. It's about leverage.
Don't spread yourself too thin.
Don't spread yourself too thin.
So find those superhighways.
Exactly. And, he even says something kind of radical. He says, if you haven't figured out how to sell your product, you don't have a business yet.
Wow.
No matter how great your product is.
It's such a reality check.
It is.
Because, yeah, you could have the most amazing thing in the world.
Yeah.
But if no one knows about it, if no one can buy it,
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
It's just an idea.
Right. It's just an idea sitting in a room somewhere.
Exactly.
So you have to figure out how to get it out there.
Distribution is everything.
And speaking of things that require a certain amount of, finesse.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Thiel also challenges us to rethink how we think about sales.
Yes. Sales. The S word.
Right. It's a word that makes a lot of people squirm.
Oh, big time.
It has this kind of icky connotation.
It feels a little dirty.
It does. Yeah, it does. Like used car salesman vibes.
Exactly.
But Thiel, he reframes it.
He does, and it's actually quite refreshing.
So tell me, how does he reframe this whole idea of sales?
Well, he argues that, in a sense, we are all selling something.
Okay.
All of us, all the time, whether we realize it or not.
Like what?
We're selling our ideas, our perspectives, our skills, our vision.
So it's about persuasion.
It is about persuasion. It's about communicating value.
Right, because even if you're not selling a physical product,
right,
you're still selling yourself. You're selling your idea.
Your vision.
And that takes skill.
It's an art form.
It is an art form.
And he stresses that this applies not just to, closing deals and hitting your quota.
Yeah.
It's about everything. It's about selling your vision, your company, yourself to potential investors.
To employees.
To employees.
To customers.
To customers.
It's about getting people on board with what you're doing.
Building those relationships, understanding what your audience needs, what they're looking for, and crafting this compelling narrative that resonates with them.
Because at the end of the day, people buy into stories, right?
They want to be part of something bigger than themselves.
And that ability to connect with people on an emotional level, it's more important than ever.
Absolutely, especially in a world that's just, it's completely saturated with information and choices.
Everyone's vying for our attention.
Screaming from the rooftops.
Exactly. So you have to cut through the noise.
You have to stand out.
You have to tell a good story.
And you have to believe in it yourself.
100%. It's like we become what we build.
Right, we do. And what we choose to build, to focus on, it says a lot about our values.
It's like choosing our own adventure, but on a societal scale.
Exactly. And Thiel, he'd argue that we need to be a lot more intentional about those choices, about what we're building, about what kind of future we're actually creating. He sees a lot of energy, a lot of talent being wasted on things that are just slightly better versions of what we already have.
Instead of shooting for the moon.
Shooting for the moon, exactly. He's not impressed by incremental improvements.
He wants to see those big leaps forward.
He wants a 0 to 1 moment.
From 0 to 1. It's like the difference between, making a slightly better smartphone.
Right.
Versus inventing teleportation.
Exactly. Or solving world hunger. Those are 0 to 1 kind of problems.
Exactly. It's about creating those entirely new categories of value.
Instead of just shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a little dark. but I see your point.
Sorry. Not to be a downer.
No, you're good. You're good. I think it's a good reminder that we have to be thinking bigger.
We do. We have to reclaim that kind of bold vision and that willingness to take risks that led to things like you said, the moon landing, the internet, the Empire State Building.
Right. All of those seemed impossible at some point.
Exactly. And yet here we are.
It's interesting, though, because Thiel also acknowledges that those kinds of breakthroughs, they're messy.
Oh, yeah.
It's not like a straight line from A to B.
Yeah.
You know, there are going to be setbacks.
There are going to be failures.
You're going to have to pivot a million times.
Absolutely. The path to success, it's never linear.
It's like those cheesy inspirational posters with the mountain climber, but it's like actually true.
Exactly. But it's about having that long-term vision.
Right, and that unwavering belief that you're going to get there.
And that's where that whole concept of definite optimism becomes so important.
Right, because it's not just about being like blindly positive.
Right.
Right.
No. It's about believing that the future can actually be shaped by the choices that we make today.
Okay, yeah.
Even if we don't know exactly what that future is going to look like, it's about being like, the authors of our own destiny in a way.
I like that. So how do we do that?
Well, I think Thiel would say, it starts with embracing that uncertainty. It starts with being willing to experiment, to take risks, to not be afraid to fail, because you know what? You're going to fail.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's going to happen. But it's about how you learn from those failures.
That's such a cliche, but it's true.
It's true, because those failures, those setbacks, those can be some of the most valuable learning experiences.
Like you learn more from your mistakes than you do from your successes, right?
1,000%. And I think that's something that those really, truly successful founders, they understand this. They get it.
They embrace it.
They embrace it, which brings us back to that whole founder's paradox thing, right?
Oh, yeah, the founder's paradox. I feel like that kind of sums up this whole conversation, actually.
It does, right? It's because, like we were saying earlier, these founders that Thiel admires, they have this really unique combination of traits. They're confident, but they're also paranoid.
They're insiders and outsiders.
They're not afraid to challenge the status quo. They're comfortable with uncertainty.
It's like they're wired differently.
They see the world differently.
And that's what allows them to create these things that other people, they can't even imagine.
It's about having the courage to be different.
To be a little bit weird, even.
To be a little bit weird.
Because the world needs weird.
The world desperately needs weird. Otherwise, we'd all just be stuck with, slightly better versions of the same old thing.
Exactly. But it's not enough to just be weird, right? You need to surround yourself with people who get it.
People who share that same vision, that same passion.
That tribe of believers that Thiel talks about.
Exactly. Who are all rowing in the same direction, who are willing to go that extra mile because they believe in what they're building, not just because it's a job.
Because it's their baby, too.
Their baby, too.
And that's what creates that energy, that momentum that you need to actually get those crazy ideas off the ground.
It's fuel for the fire.
Yeah.
And that fire, it needs to burn brightly in every aspect of the business, not just, at the product development stage.
Right, because you can have the best product in the world, but if you can't get it into the hands of customers, it doesn't matter.
Distribution, my friend. Distribution.
It's the make or break for so many companies.
And yet so many people underestimate it.
It's like Thiel said, if you haven't figured out how to sell it,
you don't have a business.
You don't have a business. And I think that's a really important point to end on.
Because it brings together all of these different ideas we've been talking about, The
vision, the team, the product, the timing.
It's about connecting all of those dots.
It's about having a great idea, but then it's also about all the hard work, all the hustle that goes into actually bringing that idea to life.
It's not always glamorous.
Oh, no.
But when it works.
When it works, it's magical.
It's world-changing.
Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into 0 to 1.
I feel like we just scratched the surface.
I know, right? There's so much more to unpack. But that's the beauty of Thiel's work. It stays with you long after you've finished reading it.
It makes you think differently about everything.
Makes you question your assumptions.
Yeah.
It makes you want to go out and build something amazing.
And isn't that the point? To challenge ourselves, to think bigger, to be bolder, to actually make a dent in the universe.
Absolutely. So to our listeners out there, what are your 0 to 1 ideas? What are you passionate about? What kind of future do you want to create?
Go out there and build it.
Because the world needs your weirdness, your brilliance, your vision. So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep building.